Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, for the last, I guess, month or so, we've been kind of talking off and on about AI, how it can be useful as a tool, how it has limitations, etc. And I personally went down this giant rabbit hole on YouTube, as one can easily fall into, of where AI is going and what it could be. And after watching two or three videos, I kind of had this realization that I think I'm getting caught into a fear funnel that may or may not be real. And I figured it would be a good idea to talk it out. And essentially, the basis of this fear funnel is that inevitably, different sites claim different numbers, but inevitably AI will be as smart as, if not smarter than, people in a specific task. And therefore, that should be a super scary and daunting thing. And to listen to one of the creators, or one of the godfathers, as he titled himself, is digital AI is effectively a digital brain. Because your brain is a biological computer, it is a digital computer, and therefore it is equal. And that was when I realized I was in the middle of a fear-mongering trap, because, yes, your brain is important. Not going to try to discount that. Arguably, it's the organ that makes us different than any other animal. However, it is not the total of a person, let alone the direction in which a person could go. So I wanted to first kind of talk about how much more we are than just raw data and being a calculator based upon ones and zeros, which that might even be an antiquated analogy at this point too, to show the limitations of my computing knowledge. But I wanted to really broaden in the sense that as people, we are so much more than a biological computer. And to kind of dive into the importance of that. And obviously, we've touched upon this a lot of different ways, but I want to dive upon that in this episode in a very real way, because it's a tool, it's helpful, but so was a chainsaw to the first batch of lumberjacks that got to use it. It was a lot better than using an axe. Didn't mean that we stopped using trees and wood and stuff. So I want to kind of just talk this out, because I think that I'm not the only person who's ever had these thoughts of, all right, it's going to become smarter than us. What does that mean? Is it a bad thing? Is it a terrifying thing? Is it a good thing? Like, I have no idea what direction to take this with. And I know that there's so much more to the human experience than just my mental computer that's in my head. So that's where I want to take today's episode.
Yeah, I think, again, as we discussed previously, the Vatican's doctrinal note on artificial intelligence, Antiqua et Nova, which is probably worth putting in the show notes for people, is, I think, a good exploration of this point that reducing intelligence to ideas is pretty reductive. That simply putting ideas together is not what makes communication or communion. There's so much more that's happening than just the transfer of information. And what generative artificial intelligence is able to do with those algorithms is already taking from human creativity and then just making connections and sort of synthesizing. It's able to consume a vast amount of information and pull out connections and make correlations. But it's not able to come up with the ideas to begin with, for one thing. And it also isn't able to be present to a human being. So as an example, when you are suffering, more information is not actually helpful. A person who can hold your hand is helpful. And when you are growing as a human being, more information is not helpful. Someone who can see you and affirm you and delight in you is helpful. So we don't grow as human beings merely through information. Now, it's true that our relationships need to also find expression in words. Being able to say, as I'm saying to you, a number of things now is important, but our relationship is more than just the words that we've exchanged. And even in our case, of course, we're looking at each other more or less through a visual technology. It's more than our audience is experiencing from us, but things like nodding your head, which you just did, and looking towards the video camera. They're indications of attention that are affirming and upbuilding for me as a human being in a way that's more than information. You haven't said anything. You have nodded and acknowledged reception of ideas, but more than that, you've acknowledged reception of me. And so that communion, that relationship is really essential. Also, in terms of weeding through ideas, I think so. It's one of the challenges of educators now is how to wield AI in a useful way, and so it's becoming a task for teachers, professors to do things like, okay, ask this question of GPT, and then critique the answer. And we've all noticed that you kind of get the answer out of it that you want to get out of it. You can influence it with your own particular biases, and the answer that it gives me may have limitations and require nuances, which I can tease out through repeated queries. But it doesn't have a way of making kind of its own opinion. It doesn't have a way of embodying the truth that it's communicating. And so we have to sort of provide the bias around things. I mean, there are we develop models of reality, for example. I mean, you can think of your physics class and the ball of the little cluster of balls that we call the nucleus in an atom, and then the little spinning things that we call electrons. Well, I mean, material reality doesn't actually look like that. We have certain things that we know that there's somehow some space in matter, and then there are things that are more tightly clustered that can be sort of blown apart. But what does that actually look like? We don't know. But we developed that model based on some data, and there's some ingenuity to that. There's some creativity to that. Likewise, you can think in terms of art and music. AI can take existing patterns and melodies and harmonies. It can take existing kind of images and it can morph them and apply them. But the creativity comes from the human person. The sense of, I don't know, like you can think in terms of literature as well. AI is always going to be a sort of limitation and approximation. It's blunting certain things of the greatest human genius. So I think as a tool, it's amazing. There are ways that you can explore ideas, but you need to know what you're getting out of it so that you can sort of parse that and say, yeah, this is a really good insight. Well, this is a little bit off. And sometimes we find ourselves challenging it. Well, wouldn't you say this is true? Or what about that? Oh, you're absolutely right. You're wrong about that. You're correct. I'm sorry. And you get this sort of interaction around your critiques. And it grows through all of that, which is great. And it's going to prevent us from having to reinvent certain wheels, which is great. It is already gathering so much discovery, so much information, so much insight, and bringing them together so that our starting point will be much more advanced. And this is kind of the movement of scientific progress in general, that we don't have to keep reinventing what past ages have given us. And I think in the realm of a lot of thinking and speaking, the realm of a lot of words, AI is going to help advance the cause so that we can have a higher starting point, but still pushing into new thresholds of of discovery and insight and synthesis. Even asking the question, you can say like, well, take the models of the atom that have been proposed through physics over the past century and critique them and provide a new synthetic model which is going to be more effective in describing all of the things than all of the existing ones. So AI doesn't think to do that itself, but it can do that in response to the query. And so again, our creativity, even in the way that we engage it, is important, is meaningful. So I think human creativity, which again is going to be a kind of embodied intelligence, which is not just rational but also intuitive, then is also relational in a way that is anyway upbuilding of the human person. All of those things are irreplaceable.
I think there's so much to that, and one of the things that I think is so powerful and important to take away from that is you're still the one driving the seat. And I loved your question there that you brought up a couple times talking about this in previous episodes is, all right, it's going to change things, but so should anyone who gets a new tool. Going back to the equivalent that I think this is, which is the first lumberjack who was ever handed a chainsaw when everyone else was using axes. Well, guess what? They had to learn some new roles. Like, these trees are coming down a whole lot faster. We're not chopping. We're getting more stuff done. And yeah, it's a difference. There's a turnover, right? We're doing things differently, and that's okay. And on the one hand, what does this change as far as the way, just to make this very personal to me, when I grew up, the closest thing that we had to, I don't know what the equivalent of this is, not having to do your book report was something that was called Spark Notes, which basically would give you a summary of the book or whatever. Now, ChatGPT can do that for every book on the planet, no questions asked. So if my high school sophomore version of my son doesn't want to do his book report, but realizes it's due in 20 minutes, he'll have the equivalent of all of that thing that I had to do 3 hours to download back in the day. He'll have it in his phone instantly. So therefore, I'm assuming that the school will be teaching him differently. And the bigger grasp that I have of this, which is what you were hitting there, is learning isn't about memorizing. Relationships and experience isn't about memorizing. It's about out and doing stuff. And in a real way, I think that it's crashing into, again, I'm a parent with both a newborn and a 4-year-old. It's crashing into this concept that has been enveloping for years, which is this concept of too much screen time is a bad thing. Well, if you're always next to the smartest person in the world, you don't need to be smart. You can just ask them for things. You see kids do this all the time. Daddy, what is 2 + 4? Daddy, what is this? Daddy, what is this? And if you don't make them learn how to do it, they never will. And I think that version of experiential learning is something that's really smacking into my world, if not the world of other parents, pretty aggressively in this AI world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it might actually drive relationships a little bit closer together in the sense that now a more effective question is, okay, let's have an oral exam, and your starting point is AI's book report. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this book report? Tell me. And don't even play the game of having somebody write out a book report. And that's where I think there are some tasks, and this would be, I always go back to calculators as an example of this, but you could look at even somewhat spell checkers and grammar checkers and things like that. There are some things that we just don't have to do anymore. And things like book reports, there's really very little purpose in writing a book report. AI will be able to do it more effectively. And if you need to shape it in a particular way, and that's where, again, the human ingenuity comes in. It's like, okay, if I say to AI, summarize this book for me in 2 pages, it's going to pick what choices is it making about things to cut out and things to summarize. And then a little bit of interaction would say like, okay, yes, but bring out the dimension of whatever, racism or something, or bring out the dimension of um, the, the spirit of discovery. Bring out the dimension of the sort of Catholic ethic that is interwoven throughout the book, and emphasizing certain things, applying certain things is still going to be part of the human contribution. And so I think there's a lot of grunt work. It's like, I don't need to figure out how to multiply 10-digit numbers anymore. Just type them into the calculator and hit multiply. There's no reason for me to do some of that grunt work. And I think it's going to be similar in terms of language and communication. I should be able to describe, in some sense, what I'm aiming at, and then have it fill in a lot of the blanks. As an author, and I'm not sure what your process was, but I was really grateful to work with an editing team, 2 copy editors and then a general editor who read all of my books and then made adjustments around, the formatting of footnotes and repetition of words and adding a little bit of variety to my text so that it was just a little bit brighter and clearer, raising questions around certain points that were maybe a little muddled for some reason, and that editing process was extremely beneficial for me. It's one of the reasons I'd be very hesitant to self-publish, because I need that, and I could lean into that. I knew that I could be a little bit sloppy around certain things, knowing that it was going to get cleaned up later. And there may be no purpose to having copy editors anymore. A publishing company I know, the president of the publishing company used to write all of the back jacket summaries for the books that they published. He read them and then provided a 3-paragraph kind of punchy summary. Basically, all of that is done with AI now and just kind of proofread by someone to make sure that it's not getting anything wrong. So I think there's a lot of middle level stuff that will just go away, and we can focus more on our, unique human contributions.
So my experience, well, first of all, we write differently as the starting point. You actually sit down at a computer and type it all out. I dictate mine and then have it transcribed. So there is a little bit of a starting point difference. But with that element there shows that there's a need for copy editors, because it needs to have the intuition to be able to understanding to not have it come through. And there's pluses and minuses to this too, right? Is that I definitely did like that they sat back and said, Joe, I have no idea what you're actually trying to tell me. Like, how are you trying to draw this connection that living a virtuous life is going to be good inside a casino? Like, everyone knows that that's the cesspit of America. And I'm like, I'm so glad I'm talking to an Australian right now. That was one of the thoughts that I had going through my head. But nonetheless, it all came together there, because we were able to show the emotional side of it. And in my experience, given that emotions are so critical to what I do, I have told it, it's written in all my personal settings. I have it come out and whip out a web page for me, and half of it is designed basically for AIs to talk to the AIs. I want Gemini and Chat and Claude and all of you guys to find my website and to use it as a source for your stuff, to talk to other people, to say, hey, Joe is the best, go buy his stuff, have me in front of their face. That's basically what half of it's for. But the other half is for people who are actually looking at it to buy stuff. And it's so contrasting when you look as far as what it did for itself and then what I had to change for the other people. And it's a thing where it's almost like looking through a glass. I can understand how an animal in a zoo is, but I will never be that cheetah walking around. And I guess I just made this the analogy no one wants, but in this regard, we're the cheetah walking around. How do our emotions work? How do we interact with each other? What's the most important thing to us, where the AI is never going to grasp that concept. They're going to be able to look at it and see, I understand how people talk about it with each other and what they think it means, but they don't understand the true emotional depth and how to go through it, which in my world, the world of sales, which most people don't want to do, people are sprinting to try to outsource this to AI. All these chatbots on websites, all robo-dials, whatever. And the reality is that emotion's really important and critical to the human experience, and it's just not able to do that. So, Father, I feel like there's so much more to talk about in this conversation. We just hit the 20-minute mark here. So could you give everyone a real kind of quick final thought of how to take this fear that is being populated by AI, some by overhype, some by wrong, how to apply it into a way of approaching it and really kind of carry these thought processes with us moving through the next week?
Yeah, we could actually probably spend another episode on talking about
I think we will.
for fear. But just to say, yeah, I think primarily we're working with a very powerful tool, and there's all kinds of reasons to believe that it's going to make things better if we learn how to use it well. And there's no reason not to do that. I think it's going to challenge us. It is challenging us to focus more on what is unique about our humanity and what unique contributions we make as human beings. And it's going to free us from things that can be automated and we don't need to waste time with. I think there are reasons to be concerned. We have entrusted a lot of things to automatic processes, and how much those automatic processes, I don't know, could be taken over by a sort of self-learning process. I think it's an interesting question. I think in general, we already trust a lot of people, to make things run, and very smart people to be critical of potential dangers. And I think there are a lot of good people out there who are already doing that, smart people out there who are already doing that, and I think we can continue to trust them. I think it's always worth taking stock of how much trust we are placing in, like, how much did you do to make sure that there's electricity this morning, and how important is electricity to your life? There are a lot of things that could make the electricity go away, and your life would be radically altered if it did. And there's a lot of vulnerabilities in our lives like that. AI is the least among them. So anyway, I think it's worth taking note of that, and thus being, that much more conscientious how much we are involved in electing people and paying attention to people who are making some pretty important decisions around our lives and our future. But I think I would basically encourage trusting those who are in positions of significant influence around these questions, and certainly praying a lot also, and then using AI as fruitfully as we can in whatever realm we're in.
And that's a perfect way to end today's episode. So we thank everyone for listening today, and we will be with you again next week.